And we're back. Hey Brian, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Nick?
I'm great. Welcome. This is a continuation of the podcast special about the ISCM. And Brian, before we get into the elevator pitch, I ask all the guests a
Oh
sneak
no.
quiz question.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Don't let us down. What does the ISCM stand for?
Okay. The International Society for Catastrophe Managers.
Ding ding ding. Okay.
Yes.
The prize is we get to continue. So Brian, this is a continuation about catastrophe modeling, its importance in the insurance industry, beyond just the modeling, and as me and a couple of the other guests have talked about, the voodoo that's
The voodoo.
behind the catastrophe modeling. That is very important. So, Brian, why don't we just take a minute or so and describe who are you? What is it that you do on a day-to-day basis, and what's your role at the ISCM?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Well, my name is Brian Bastian. I'm the head of product at Green Shield Risk Solutions, sort of an early stage business working on securing capacity for an MGA. I'm largely responsible for a lot of the catastrophe type analytical products and solutions that we deliver to the MGA and to other kind of clients of ours, carriers and other MGAs. Yeah, my day to day is I wear lots of hats. I always joke if someone looked at my calendar, I color code all the things that I do in a week. Just looks like a bunch of chiclets. And so I'm at that really unique like intersection, I would describe it, between sort of certainly our industry and the business itself, but also, user experience and design and, our engineering and sort of science team at Green Shield. And where those sort of meet, that crucible of where those three pieces meet, that's sort of where product lives and how we build, how we ship, how we support, and how we evolve product to
Yeah,
support the needs of, yeah,
yeah,
our
and
business.
and and you have an engineering background,
I do.
right, and a product background. So you have an engineering degree, but you've been busy building product
Very
in
busy.
many of your roles.
Yeah. So before I joined Green Shield, and it's been just about a year, a little over a year since I
Mhm.
joined, I was with Guy Carpenter. Before that, I was part of the merger, the acquisition, I should say, of Guy Carpenter by JLT. So that's sort of how I got my start in the reinsurance and catastrophe risk management space. And throughout that time, and now since I've been at Green Shield, sort of, yeah, living in that cross section as I've described it, largely around building products to support catastrophe risk management. And yeah, my background, my colleagues wish I would start with this. My background's in meteorology, so I did go to school to study the weather.
Meteorology, yes.
Yeah,
Sorry,
meteorology.
for
I
some
know
for
it's
some
okay.
reason I had engineering on my mind, but
No,
yes,
that's okay.
yours.
But I did my
I
master's degree in systems engineering, so you
There
were
you
also right. Yeah, so I sort of landed. I feel very fortunate in my career, and I know we're going to talk about the ISIM quite a bit because that's been actually a tremendous enabler for me and how we sort of network, within the organization. But yeah, I've sort of established this interesting niche in product because I have that engineering background, but I also have this kind of core science background, and I just love the space that we're in.
Yeah, marvelous. What is your role at the ISCM?
So my role at the ISCM is I co-lead our technology committee with another gentleman, Nick DeMuzio, good buddy, also been with the ICM. I'm actually a past president of the ISCM. So he and I co-lead a relatively small committee in tech that really supports all the other committees, really the front lines of what the ICM is all about in terms of our
Yeah.
mission.
So what is your mission? From a technology standpoint, what kind of contribution are you hoping to make, especially as a coming from a non-insurance background into this particular space? That's part of what it is we're trying to promote, is that this catastrophe area has a lot of benefits for lots of personnel beyond just like the actual reinsurance person or someone who's specifically focused on catastrophe modeling, but well beyond that as well. What is the mission of the committee?
Yeah, so the technology committee, I often speak about us as an enabler for the other committees that are at the forefront of our core mission. And I sort of alluded to that just a couple minutes ago. And I guess what I mean by that is, to your point, Nick, largely what we're trying to achieve as an organization is continue to promote the catastrophe risk management discipline as a function, not just within the insurance or reinsurance space, but across many other industries. And that, cat modeling is only become more and more important as we try to wrestle with how best to quantify this risk that is so inherently uncertain. And there are obviously methods that can be used to help with that, and modeling is one piece of it. But then there are other kinds of data and technologies and solutions that also support that space. So our education and credentialization committees that are, I believe, are part of this, which is
Mhm.
fantastic. They're really the ones who are making sure that we've got a good signal from the pulse that is our market on what that sort of next generation and the current generation of catastrophe risk management skill sets are, and what that discipline needs to be, and making sure that we're partnering with the right people and experts and organizations to bring that about to our members and non-members. And so where does technology fit in that, as we sort of usher in, I'll say, the next wave? I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty young person, but I am old by kind of new graduate standards. I'm 34 years old. Gosh, that's crazy saying out loud. I'm 34. That just means there are, colleagues of mine, let's say former colleagues at Guy Carpenter or elsewhere, who are right out of school and are 10 years younger than me. And as the way that generation, especially amidst COVID and things becoming more and more remote, like the way that the sort of next generation of catastrophe risk management professionals want to engage with education and want to engage with professional organizations, it just looks different than it did 15 years ago. I think
Yeah.
there's an expectation for more technology enabled, technology forward type content and ways of interacting with a community. So technology committee is really about understanding what those best practices are, making sure that we're a voice alongside our friends in the other committees, so that how we actually go about creating a really positive experience for, again, our members and non-members around credentialization and around education. Takes advantage of all those things.
Yeah, it's a battle I have online with lots of folks as well. This generation wants to do everything digitally, right? They want to be educated
That
digitally. They want to communicate digitally. Like just this morning, someone was trying to tell me like nobody wants to make a phone call. I'm like, I get it. I know they would rather email or text. So that is what brought me to the ISCM. I became a member
mm,
last year, and it was a webinar event that you were hosting. Can you talk a little bit about that? That seems to be your prime methodology, and webinars are hot, right? But the webinars that you have are across a span of different types of topics. Like you can get
oh yeah.
really really deep into the weather, or it can get really deep into modeling output or something like that. Can you talk about how you guys think about setting up these webinars, and how do you come up with topics?
Yeah. So I guess first I'll speak to, the webinar as a choice to really, I guess, deploy to the masses, trying to organize. We used to do a lot more in-person events, frankly, pre-COVID. I think there was a lot more emphasis, and as people aren't even going into the office these days, how do we make sure we keep a cadence, right, where we're introducing as many varied topics as we possibly can. So the webinar is sort of a natural fit for that. And we record all of our events after the fact. I know I wouldn't be the first to admit that, I'll sign up for things and something comes up and I can't attend. So I do rely on, those recordings after the fact. So we provide those there too. But no, the webinar is a really important, mechanism for us to, distribute the kind of educational content we want. We also do, I would say, a shorter form coffee break, coffee
Hmm.
kind of style, which is a little bit different in form, but similar in nature, wanting to cover a variety of different topics that are unique, that don't necessarily try to address every need for every person around our membership and non-membership. But, we see everyone, we've all seen a million like hurricane, let's say, related, webinars, across the vendor space and across a number of different, companies within the market. So we're constantly trying to find, unique ways of covering either a common topic, let's say like hurricane or hurricane modeling, but balancing that with a good diversity of other topics. That the education committee, I guess, last comment I'll make is, I'm less involved, with that committee and some of the decision making around what topics we do, but I know they are pretty consistent about soliciting ideas for new kinds of topics, and that planning is done well in advance. You can appreciate for when for when we actually hold the in-person event or the remote event. So if there are topics that people have, that your membership have, regardless of whether or not this is the first time you've heard of the ICM, encourage folks to send those our way. Those are the kinds of things we want to cover. So yeah, thanks, Nick.
Yeah. Uh, And speaking of membership, I'd like to end this particular conversation talking about expanding membership. So if you look at the name, I think a lot of insurance professionals would see that and like, oh, that's a networking group for cat modelers. And the thing is, I saw some of the webinar events and I was struck at the information. I'm like, this is useful for everybody. And my experience has been over the past few years, I've seen more underwriters and more folks that are not cat modelers
Mm-hmm.
get value from cat modeling. You're a scientific professional who came into the insurance space, and you brought up early on in the conversation how much value you got from the ISCM. So, Brian, we're talking to underwriters, to brokers, to insurance professionals that are not dealing with cat modeling on a day-to-day basis. Why is the ISC, what is so valuable about catastrophes that an underwriter or broker may want to join the ISCM?
Well, I guess I'll say we are the International Society of Catastrophe Managers, not the International Society of Catastrophe Modeling, right? And
Okay.
that I think was a very important choice by the founding fathers and mothers, I guess you could say, of the organization. Because if there's anything I learned, especially my time at Guy Carpenter, I was on the catastrophe exposure and risk management services team, and we were all about complementing what our modeling team did with the range of other ways that carriers, MGAs, brokers, underwriters need to manage the risk because there are, and it's an international organization, there are some perils that are ripe for modeling. Just there's more robustness, there's a maturity to those models, there's an understanding of the primary and secondary uncertainty around those models. And so, great, we kind of know and understand that. But then at the same time, there are all these other new perils or perils that have been there all along. But now we're starting to see that impact on the industry as a whole. We're trying to figure out the best way to underwrite it, the best way to transfer risk in that space. And modeling is going to continue to be an important piece of that. But so are many, many other techniques for managing the risk. And that doesn't discriminate in terms of stakeholder, right? That is not a modeling challenge. That is a industry challenge. And so if you touch the industry in any way, be it in claims or risk management or loss control or underwriting or broking or reinsurance or capital markets or like you name it, it affects you. And so having an understanding of the science, really, that's sort of the core of what cat management is all about. And then obviously the range of different techniques for managing and quantifying the risk. Yeah, it benefits you to understand what we're doing because we're speaking to all of that, through our educational and credentialization.
Yeah, it had a good social media battle yesterday where we talked about Hurricane Ian. One of the biggest losses was auto, right? Generally not thought of as a catastrophic exposure,
No,
but it is, not just in Hurricane Ian, but think of all the hail damage that occurs to vehicles. And then I think of, 9/11, and that was a massive workers' compensation loss. Again, generally not thought of from a
right.
catastrophe perspective. So, if you're in insurance, catastrophes have a sneaky way of finding their way into life,
They
health,
do.
accident, and other areas.
That's a
So
good way to
you
describe
really
it.
sh
Yeah.
you really should bone up. And listen, the membership fee is $100, right? Like it's
Yeah.
probably one of the best values that you're going to get. So, Brian, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to talk about catastrophes and squaring it away. Catastrophe managers, not just catastrophe modelers.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Nick.
So,
Appreciate it.
thanks, Brian.